and welcome back to The Voice of AURAC, where we dive into intellectual and educational discussions bridging academia with the corporate world. I'm your host, Ghada Shalabi, and today our guest, Dr. Alexandria Proff, who is an expert in leadership and organizational behavior, is also the chair of Humanities and Social Sciences Department. She also teaches the Master of Education Educational Leadership program at AURAC. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alexandria.
Thank you so much for having me, Ms. Ghada.
Thank you for being here. So let's dive right in. Actually, the topic of today is empathetic leadership, and it's a topic I'm very fascinated by once I've attended some of your seminars about it. So let's start off with getting an idea about what empathetic leadership really is and why is it important in today's world?
So that's a great question, and one that's really timely. In contextualizing empathy and empathetic leadership, let me take you back a little while to where I first became aware of empathy. So 2018 was a big year for me. It was the year my doctoral degree was conferred. It was also the year my husband passed away. And I learned a lot that year. I learned about myself, about life, about grief, and about people. I learned, for example, that people often become uncomfortable with other people's pain and other people's hardship. In the days and weeks and months that followed my husband's passing, I had so many people come by to pay condolences. And so frequently, you could see their discomfort. They didn't know how to fix this problem. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. As I reflect on that, I realized that people didn't know how to connect. And it's then that I really came to understand what empathy is. So what is empathy? Empathy is the genuine connection between two individuals. And when we contextualize that in leadership, empathetic leadership, it is the genuine connection between leaders and followers. It's also the connection between leaders and colleagues, other people in the vicinity. So empathetic leaders purposefully work to create cultures and spaces that value people, that are person-focused. And by person-focused, we mean focusing on the individual behind the task. There are human beings completing tasks, not just tasks that need to be accomplished. And why is this so important? The world is increasingly dynamic. Our organizations need to be agile, and in order to have organizations that are agile, you need leaders who are agile, leaders who are responsive, leaders who can see people and can see struggles, who don't become uncomfortable, who recognize that the human experience is complex and nuanced, and sometimes we just need a little bit of understanding.
Yeah, well, wow. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, as a concept, empathetic leadership sounds amazing because it's not easy. And like you shared, it was a very tough experience that you've been through that led you to a realization that some people might have not experienced that, maybe not gone through a similar experience. So maybe we can break it down further from a concept, and maybe you can tell us some practical ways in which leaders can develop and practice empathy in their daily interactions.
That's such a great perspective. So I'm a big fan of what I call low-effort strategies. So things that don't require a big time investment or a big energy investment. Yeah. Our lives are busy, they are stressful, they are complex. And we want to be able to apply strategies quickly and effectively. So I'll highlight maybe 3 low-effort strategies that you could use right now, today, by the time you finish listening to this podcast.
Okay, amazing.
So the first strategy I would say is for all leaders, is leaders can talk less.
Yeah.
It seems a bit counterintuitive, maybe. I think there's this impression that leaders have to have all the answers all the time. And I think we're coming to realize as we continue in the 21st century that that's not a good approach. And that, in fact, our expertise is in small areas. And that the best thing leaders can do is surround themselves with really smart people in all the areas that they're not experts in. So that's not to suggest that leaders shouldn't be talking. Certainly need to talk, right? But you might want to talk last. In a meeting, for example, if you're leading a meeting with your team, allow the team to talk. Yeah. Let everyone contribute. See the contributions that people can make. And you get to be the last person at that table to wrap everything up. And that serves a couple of ends. Number one, you get to see how amazing your team are. Let them contribute. Let them feel like they're a part of this meeting, not that they're in an information or listening session.
Yeah.
So they get to feel like they belong there. It also enables you to model empathetic phrasing. So you might say, if you can see that you have someone on your team who's really great, really competent, but a little shy, they get to finally have a contribution, might have been really difficult for them.
Yeah.
You might be able to do some empathetic phrasing and say something like, I can see that you had a really valuable contribution. I'm so glad you shared that with the team today.
Yeah.
If you've got someone who you know is struggling with a personal issue, you can be able to say something like, what I hear you saying is X, Y, or Z. Do I have that right? So you give someone an opportunity to correct the record, to make sure that...
Motivate them also to be able
Yeah.
to share more, yeah.
Definitely. And it gives people the space to make sure they are heard or that their message is received the way it was intended to be delivered.
Yeah.
So talk less, talk, but talk purposefully. That would be
Yes.
the first tip. The second tip I have for you is what I call reframing or perspective taking. So this involves someone intentionally seeing something from another person's perspective. Now, the important thing to remember here is that this doesn't necessarily mean you have to accept someone else's views, beliefs, or perspective on it. It just means you understand it.
Yeah.
So being able to reframe a situation, perhaps from a negative light to a positive light. So if something happens in the environment of the work environment and it has consequences that could be negative, you could reframe that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
How can we turn this cost around into an opportunity for us to build something new?
Yeah.
How do we take this, hit to the budget, for example? How can this hit to the budget be an opportunity for us to get creative? How can we do more with less?
Yeah.
So if we can reframe into positive light, that helps us. And if we can perspective take and see things from other people's perspectives, their truth, doesn't have to be your truth, but their truth,
Yeah.
it allows you to connect with them.
And being able to give people the benefit of the doubt, I think, also is very important because
Yeah.
intentions do matter. And if you know that person is really trying their best, for example, but falls short at some areas, maybe understanding that will help you help them get better at whatever it is that they're lacking.
Absolutely. And it helps them when you create that space by perspective taking. It enables you to facilitate the growth of that person. And that person becomes really motivated to continue to persist. And resilience is in short supply in the workforce today.
True. Yeah.
So reframing, perspective taking. And the last tip I would have for leaders is this. Feedback isn't always an evaluative process. I think sometimes the way in which we are providing feedback to members of the team, this is true for teachers in a classroom, it's true for leaders in a team, it's true for anyone in any kind of evaluative or authoritative role. We oftentimes provide feedback only in critique, and it feels like an evaluation. And while that's certainly important, we might want to reconsider the process of feedback. For example, you might want to let someone know, hey, Ghada, thanks so much for coming to that open day. I really appreciate that you did X, Y, or Z. You did such a great job there. I just wanted to let you know. That's feedback.
Yeah.
And it's feedback that was positive, that was conversational, that felt informal, and helped create a connection. If every time I'm giving someone feedback, it's framed as a critique, that person becomes a little bit sensitive to the feedback. They may become reluctant to incorporate feedback into their, future decision making, and it puts a distance between the leader and the follower. So what we really want to do is have some empathy in the feedback that we provide. Frame it in a way that is not only negative, that is critical and constructive when it needs to be, but constructive and positive when it can be as well.
Yes.
So those would be 3 low-effort strategies that people could apply right now
I
today.
think that's very helpful and really helps connect more to the concept of empathetic leadership, where it's something that's doable. That, okay, I hear about empathetic leadership, but can I apply it? And I think through those strategies, it sounds like it's something that can be done. Which leads me to the next question. And I think the answer to this question is very important for organizations to see if empathetic leadership is something that is worth investing in, like resources, training, and educating the employees to apply empathetic leadership. And the question would be, how does empathetic leadership affect and impact the overall performance of an organization?
So I think the idea of organizational performance is a really important one, particularly for industry. Sometimes we conceptualize empathy as something that is really soft and fluffy.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't contribute to real results. Mm-hmm. But I think the reality is that's simply untrue. So you will see a lot on social media today, in Forbes and other magazines and publications, periodicals, of people talking about toxic workplaces, toxic managers. And remember, when people leave workplaces, they don't leave organizations, they leave people. So when we think about leveraging empathy in the workplace, what we're really talking about is creating a work environment that values people, that sees people. And even in a world of generative AI, people can't be replaced, right? Generative AI is a new tool that people will leverage, inshallah, for increased productivity, for diversifying skill sets, for upskilling, for a whole host of really amazing things we can do. But it can't replace the human experience. True. So empathy or empathetic leadership influences organizational performance because it equips you to leverage empathetic skills to create cultures of meaning for people. When people want to be at work, they work better. They work harder. Right. You strengthen not only the performance output, but you strengthen the connections between individuals. Fundamentally, we as people want to belong. We want to feel connected to other people. It's when we are happiest. So when you can leverage those skills in the workplace, you create an environment where people want to belong, people want to contribute, people want to work hard. And that allows us to do some pretty important things at a workplace. Number one, you can retain your talent. Highly talented people will want to be a place where they're valued, where they feel like their skills are contributing meaningfully to the goals of the organization, where they feel important. So you can retain highly talented people, but you also get to recruit highly qualified people to join the team. And again, that's because there's a lot more unhappy workplaces than happy ones. So empathy, I think in a really practical way, enables an organization to have a competitive advantage. 100%. You're recruiting the best people because that's where they want to be. They could go anywhere, but they're choosing to come here. Why? Because they know this is a place where they're going to be seen as a human being. They're going to be surrounded by people who promote their wellness. Their contributions are going to be valued. They're not going to have a manager who tries to steal their glory. They're going to have a place to belong.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so for the next question, I think maybe we can take a realistic standpoint and look at leaders as individuals who also go through periods of stress and, where they have to achieve targets and meet deadlines. And I believe in such an environment of stress, maybe for short periods of time, empathetic leadership might take the back seat. They might not be as committed to it, given that they are not in the headspace where they can be as empathetic as they could be. So to that end, what other challenges do leaders face when applying empathetic leadership, and how can they overcome them?
That's such an important question, because you're absolutely right. When we talk about empathy, it all feels very intuitive, right?
Yeah.
Easy, accessible. Because fundamentally, who doesn't want to feel important? Who doesn't want to feel valued? But as you rightfully point out, there are challenges to applying empathy. I'll highlight two for the purposes of today's discussion. The first one is the best empathetic leaders are people who model really good self-regulatory skills. A lot of the work we do in empathy and empathetic leadership has to do with regulating. As you said, workplaces have become stressful or can become stressful. Workplaces are dynamic. We have deadlines, particularly hard deadlines, which are non-negotiables. Sometimes that means people need to work extra hours or work harder or diversify their skill sets, so they're working beyond their areas of expertise. There's all these different stressors in the environment, and that hits acutely individuals in authoritative roles. And I think the myth of leadership is that it's easy.
Oh, it's definitely not.
It's definitely not. I've been in senior administration now for 13 years, and it doesn't get easier with time. You just get better at coping with the changes. Sort of, in English we say, you roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-regulatory skills, I think, are critical. And that's because a lot of the work we do as leaders is sometimes co-regulating. So if there's a stressor in the environment and you can see someone on your team is having a difficult time, that might look like someone coming to your office, sitting down, saying, Dr. Khada, this thing is happening, so-and-so spoke to me in this way I didn't like. Did you see the email that so-and-so sent? And they have almost this hyper-emotional reaction to it.
Yeah.
What a leader wants to do in that space is co-regulate. Yeah? You want to validate this person. Maybe they have a very valid reason for being frustrated. Maybe there was something potentially insulting in that email.
Yeah.
But you want to co-regulate that person. And what that means is model almost explicitly a different way, perspective taking, reframing, of how to interpret that.
Yeah.
So you might say, I understand that was really frustrating, and you're right. So-and-so shouldn't have put that in writing, or they shouldn't have taken that tone. You might also co-regulate in the sense of contextualizing that. Emails sometimes are void of context. It's not a person talking, it's words on a screen.
Yeah.
So let's take a deep breath. Even if she meant that, we know X, Y, or Z. So you're able to co-regulate that person, bring that person back down to baseline, and continue on with your day. As you mentioned, though, leaders have their own stressors, in addition to having to co-regulate for other people. So you want to model how to do that for your team, so over time they're able to do more of that themselves. But you need to be someone who's really good at regulating your own emotions and stressors to be present for your team. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You're allowed to have your own emotional spaces, but do them in a space where you're able to have that space for yourself. So self-regulatory skills are going to be really critical for individuals who want to really effectively apply empathetic leadership strategies. I'd say the other issue or the other challenge for leaders is time management. So time management is critical for all domains, all disciplines, everybody, leaders, followers, all of us everywhere. But it's acutely critical for leaders. And it's because you're managing not just your own time, but the time of your team. And sometimes you're managing or leading multiple teams with multiple ends across multiple units. Sometimes you're collaborating with units you have no authority over. Correct. So being able to manage that time while self-regulating isn't always easy. It does get better with practice, though. So like all things, as I said earlier, that I've been in senior administration 13 years. This version of myself as leader was not the version I was 13 years ago. You get better at coping with different stressors. You get better at navigating personal challenges. You get better at co-regulating. You get better at regulating yourself. You get better at prioritizing your schedule. So if you're finding that you're struggling being empathetic, that you're finding yourself really stressed, and you're not really available to others when you need to be, take heart, take it easy, give yourself some space to be imperfect, and then take one low-effort strategy at a time.
Yeah.
Take that talking less. Start with that at a meeting. See how that goes. When you're able to start talking less, then start modeling some empathetic phrasing. When you're able to do that, start modeling reframing. Start purposefully looking for positive spins or positive ways to view a challenge. Start seeing opportunities. And slowly but surely start applying some of these empathetic strategies. And you'll find with practice is purposeful though, you have to want to do it. With practice, these things become a lot more accessible, and you will notice the difference in your team. And you will see their performance and the connections between people really skyrocket.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, actually. And I think they're very helpful tips to face those challenges. And what I'm hearing from this answer is that empathetic leadership is a work in progress. No one starts off at the top. You have to work your way there, and you have to want to work your way there to be able to achieve it. So to that end, what resources would you say or would you recommend for a leader who wants to apply that into their daily interactions and want to achieve and be better at empathetic leadership?
So luckily for us today, there's a whole array of resources ready in the form of books. There's a great book by Brene Brown called Dare to Lead. I have that book. It's wonderful. There's a variety of podcasts you can listen to, like this one, mashallah. It's easy enough to find places where you can upskill. There's Coursera and other places where you can upskill. And if you want a major upskill, of course, you could definitely join our Master of Education program in Educational Leadership. We will definitely help you upskill and acquire some of these transferable skills to the workplace to equip you to be the leader that you've always hoped to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandria, for your time and for sharing such insightful tips and tricks about empathetic leadership. I think it's very important for people to understand that. Whether they are in leadership positions right now or getting into it, I think it's important for people to be able to apply that skill. Even if they're not in leadership positions, I believe everyone is a leader in a certain situation, maybe even with their friends, maybe with their siblings, and it's important to be empathetic and see things from other people's perspective. Thank you so much for your time and for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to tune in into our next episode where we will continue to explore further topics that are relevant in today's world. Until next time, this is your host, Ghada Shalabi, signing out.